Hi there, this is Power and Politics. I'm Katie Simpson in Ottawa. Air Canada says it's set to begin cancelling flights as more than 10,000 flight attendants prepare to walk off the job.
It will affect a lot.
They're praying that it's not going to happen.
We're just waiting for our flights to get canceled.
I need to get home.
A strike could start this weekend if a deal isn't reached. We'll get the latest on negotiations just ahead. And
tariffs on Canadian imports do not create more U.S. jobs.
Ontario puts up big loans to help certain sectors hit hard by U.S. tariffs. The Power Panel is here to talk about the latest move to offset the pain of the trade war. Plus,
it is going to be very significant. It's an investment in peace and saving the two-state solution.
there is new praise for Canada's plan to recognize Palestinian statehood. We'll ask the Palestinian ambassador to the United Nations if he thinks this diplomatic push can lead to change on the ground in Gaza. Power and Politics starts right now. We begin with that potential Air Canada strike. After reaching an impasse in negotiations, the Flight Attendants Union gave the airline a 72-hour strike notice. They could walk off the job as early as this Saturday. Air Canada says about 130,000 customers could be affected. Now, the CBC's Rafi Boudjikanian is joining me now with the latest. Rafi, where do the negotiations stand at this point?
There are no negotiations going on right now. Katie, you know how when you're about to board a flight, sometimes you'll see flight attendants outside at the gate, and then they'll greet passengers as they come in. Well, all that stuff, the union says, is unpaid labor. Attendants are not actually getting paid to do that work. The kind of counter for their salary only starts once the plane's doors shut. And that's been one of the big issues for them during these negotiations. They've been wanting full compensation for that. The company, Air Canada, maintains that the overall compensation they receive, well, it does kind of cover that section of their work. But they said, the union said, the air carrier admitted that they could perhaps be paid more visibly and offered a 50% wage for that part of their daily work. The union does not want that. They say they deserve 100% of their wages, and so they rejected that offer along with whatever else Air Canada was offering. The rest of it is still a little unclear. We've heard from the company that they were offering an overall 38% global wage increase spread over 4 years, and that's what the union rejected. So they put up that strike notice shortly, about an hour after midnight last night. Air Canada responded with the lockout notice today, which means that they're going to be phasing out their flights starting tomorrow for a full shutdown by the weekend. And that's where things are at right now.
So what is the federal government saying?
Well, we reached out to them today. We tried to get Minister Patty Hajdu, Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu, for comment. I believe your show asked for an interview and did not get that either. They did give us a statement, but the statement doesn't seem to reflect the latest that's been happening, because they said, we hope that the two sides remain at a table. I mean, there might be a table right now, but nobody's around it as far as we can tell from the union and the employer. They've kind of put out these dueling statements saying that they're going on strike. Well, no, you're getting locked out. And that's where things are at the moment. We do know from what Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu said yesterday in a social media statement that she has spoken to negotiators from both sides, and she has said federal mediators remain available, but there is nobody picking up on that offer right now. The employer had suggested before yesterday that they want to enter into a binding arbitration process with the union, so the federal government would get involved. The union has rejected that.
Okay, Rafi Boudjikanian, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And so for the latest on what's going on, whether the negotiations are happening or if they're on pause or if they're planned or whatever the next step is going to be, we are joined by Wesley Lasowski. He is the president of the Air Canada component of CUPE. Thank you very much for joining us. I want to just start with, is there any sort of update you can share on negotiations or plans to negotiate? What's sort of the status here?
Yeah, so I'll just make a few corrections. So the union has been at the table all day today. We have met with federal mediators, my apologies, twice. We were at the table until just shy of 2 a.m. this morning as well. As you know, we served the strike notice, and that was to apply pressure to get the company to come back to the table. So we're prepared to negotiate. We're just waiting for the company to realize that they need to play a part in those negotiations as well.
So are negotiations actively happening in this moment?
So nothing has come back from the employer, nor has the employer come back to us on things. So I would say that there is no negotiating going back and forth, but the union is here waiting to negotiate when they're ready.
Okay, so how would you describe, in terms of how far apart things stand between the union and Air Canada at this point?
There's two big sticking points, I'll call it, and that's the overall wage compensation, as well as the portion of unpaid work.
Okay, and so has there been any progress sort of in the last 24 hours around those issues, or would you say the two sides remain far apart?
I would say the two sides remain apart. I wouldn't say far apart. We've gone back to the employer with proposals. They just haven't engaged or come back with anything. We have altered our proposals while going back as well to get engagement, but again, nothing has come back to them from them.
Now, Air Canada previously requested government-directed arbitration. Is that something that you see as a viable option at this point?
I don't see it as a viable option, and we're coming out of a 10-year collective agreement. Within that 10-year collective agreement, we fell so far behind. So what we're asking for is to be brought up to where we need to be, comparable to other airlines in Canada. We also, have been told by the government that the best deals are negotiated at the table, and that's what we want to do, is negotiate something so our members have an opportunity to ratify it and both sides leave happy, protecting obviously the careers that we want and the brand and Air Canada.
When you look at the deals that other airlines have, what would you say is the gold standard that you're aiming for here?
That's a hard question. You look around and see different airlines out there, whether it's in the States or whether it's in Canada. But what we're looking for here at Air Canada, and what our members have clearly directed us with such a strong strike mandate, is they want industry-leading compensation in wages, and they want unpaid work to be a thing of the past. They don't want to have to be doing the safety aspects that they're currently doing with no compensation.
During the last session of Parliament, both the Conservatives and the NDP had come forward with bills to amend the Labour Code to ensure that flight attendants would be compensated for those pre-boarding and post-landing duties. But it hasn't, because Parliament was prorogued, it didn't happen. Do you have any indication whether the Liberals support this? You've got, the opposition supporting it. Do the Liberals support this?
We have never heard directly from the Liberals of their strong support. What we have heard is that it needs to be done at the bargaining table, and you need to bargain it, you need to move it forward there. I do know that the NDP has said that they're going to reintroduce it. I do know that we've heard that the Conservatives, as of last week, again, support it and say it needs to be a thing. I don't think it's dead in government. I think it'll go back to government. I think that's the best place for it to have been settled. But unfortunately, here we are, and now it's been left on us by the government, unfortunately, to settle in this contract discussion. So
as we heard from my colleague Rafi Boudjikanian, what we understand that Air Canada has offered is that they're offering a 50% of wages for the pre-takeoff, post-landing duties, and then offered what they describe as a 38% on global compensation. That's a direct quote from an Air Canada official. I'm not quite sure what that means specifically, but why is that offer not something that you would accept?
Yeah, excellent question. So the overall compensation includes things like prone rest. So a flight attendant will be able to get 8 hours in a hotel of sleep. It includes things like crew complement to bring it up to the demands that the employer has when it comes to service levels on board. That's the overall part. But the part that's going to hit our members' pocket, what they proposed in their last pass, was 8% in the first year. That still leaves us 1% less than where inflation has us now. So that's not even a wage increase to bring us to today's standards. And we'll still keep our entry-level flight attendants and our flight attendants at Air Canada Rouge, unfortunately, at poverty levels. So that is the challenge that we have. And when we talk about the unpaid work portion, yes, they said 50% of that pre-boarding and post arrival duties, but that's not at 100% of that time. Meaning if we're there an hour prior and 50 minutes after, they are not offering 75 minutes of pay at halftime. In fact, they haven't even come at par with what Porter, a non-union airline at the time, offered their flight attendants. So it's a problematic proposal. It doesn't keep us with parity within Canada, nor does it advance us to the safety professionals we are at Air Canada.
There are a lot of anxious Canadians watching this. You know, it's not just summer vacations that could be disrupted by a strike. It also could have a really significant impact on Canadian businesses. What do you say to Canadians who are watching this, who are deeply concerned that they could be personally affected by this?
No, I 100% sympathize with that. We are in the same boat too. We do not want to go on strike. Again, we waited till the last minute. In fact, we waited an hour past that mark to hope that Air Canada would come to the table. The ball is in Air Canada's court. We, again, don't want to go on strike. We want to come to a resolution at the table where deals are made. We want to bring something forward to our members that can ratify and that Air Canada can live with. And that is the goal still. But we just, unfortunately, at this stage, can't give up what we don't have. And that's basic wages to keep up with inflation and payment for hours that are worked. So I do feel for the public, I do, and flight attendants are incredibly compassionate and want to do their job, but we also have to look after ourselves, especially coming out of 10 years. So Air Canada can certainly solve this by coming back to the table and negotiating, and we do hope they do, so that we can preserve that for all the Canadians and people from around the world that want to travel here. My last question is, do you anticipate there will be a strike? I'm hopeful there won't be, but how things look now, that's very unknown. So all I can say is that I hope that Air Canada does come to the table so we can obviously not go down the strike path. Okay, Wesley Lasowski, thank you for your time. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. We did reach out to Air Canada for an interview today, as well as the federal government. No one was made available to our program. Right now, 2 wildfires are burning out of control in New Brunswick. Up next, the latest on the situation on the ground from Premier Susan Holt.
Two major wildfires are still burning out of control in New Brunswick. One fire is burning near Moncton, the other near Miramichi. Both are major cities in the province. While the temperature warnings still remain in place for most of New Brunswick, there is some heat relief expected tomorrow. Susan Holt is the Premier of New Brunswick. She joins us now. Thank you very much for taking the time to chat with us. Let's just start with what is the latest on the ground right now?
The latest on the ground is that we are feeling cautiously optimistic about the fire in Irishtown. So this is just north of Moncton. It's about 45 hectares in size. We've kept it to that size now for the last day or so. And the crews have got, a retardant barrier, a water barrier that we're really hopeful that we'll be able to call that contained here in the next day. The fire in the Miramichi, the Oldfield Road fire, that was our first one, continues to grow. It's more than 1,300 hectares now. But our incredible crew of firefighters have been able to direct it at least away from people and structures. And we're really hoping that the shift in weather and temperatures and maybe a bit of rain is going to come and help us turn the corner on that one.
Do you have all the resources you need on the ground in this moment?
Oh, gosh. I mean, you always feel like it's never enough, but it does give me the opportunity to recognize what a team effort this has been. We have received water bombers from Quebec. We've received firefighters from Nova Scotia, from PEI, from the state of Maine. And we've also shared some of our resources with Newfoundland and with Nova Scotia because all of us are prioritizing people and homes as we fight fires that I think Canadians have been seeing across our country for the last many months now. So we in New Brunswick are usually the ones to lend ourselves out. This is the first time that we have ever had to ask for help, but thankfully help has been there, and we've gotten the planes and the people that we need to be able to say that there is no lives in New Brunswick that have been lost to date with this firefight.
I recognize that, in an emergency, the priority is to keep people safe, to try and protect businesses and homes and try to contain this fire. But I'm wondering, is there anything that you've learned from this wildfire season that really stands out to you as sort of a learning moment that the province can sort of take something away from, that so perhaps in years to come, there's better preparation or better, deployment to deal with it?
Great question, Katie. And I'm really grateful to the folks who came before me, actually. We had a fire here in New Brunswick about 3 years ago. And after that, some investments were made in a few more aircraft through Forest Protection Limited. Some investments were made in the kind of structure protection infrastructure for our Forest Fire Center. And some of those investments were just coming online now. We had ordered actually some more water bombers this past spring, and those have proved to be exceptionally helpful. The other learning, I think, is the regional nature of some of this resource management. So there's going to be good conversations for Premier Houston and Premier Lance and Premier Hogan and I to have about how we better share and coordinate investment in resources and services, align some of our data and information systems, because we're each helping each other out right now, and that could be made stronger and smoother in the future.
So by chance this year, some of those additional resources just happen to come online. Do you anticipate going forward, given the extreme weather that is sort of now more and more common as a result of climate change, do you anticipate having to make further investments to have additional resources ready to go if we continue to see these kinds of fires?
Yes, I think we can safely say that we can expect to see more of these kinds of fires. And so it wasn't by chance, but by foresight that experts had recommended the investment in those additional equipment and making sure we had trained professionals available, and we were able to lend them out to Ontario and Manitoba and other provinces. And then they were here when we needed them right now. And so continuing to have that foresight that we have a shifting climate, that hotter, drier temperatures are coming in future years, means that we can take these learnings and continue to invest both in the attack and mitigation strategies, but also in our continued evolution of forest management and forest practices here in New Brunswick.
Now, New Brunswick certainly is not alone in this summer, dealing with extreme weather and wildfires. Some American lawmakers have actually complained to the ambassador in the U.S. and have complained elsewhere about smoke from Canada traveling across the border to the United States and causing smoky conditions. They say it ruins summers in the U.S. I'm wondering, were any of those complaints directed toward you at all specifically? And what's your response to lawmakers who are mad about the Canadian wildfire smoke traveling south of the border?
Well, there's certainly some things that are traveling north of the border that I'm mad about right now, but our priority is focused on New Brunswickers' lives, protecting them and those of our neighboring provinces, of doing the right thing by the people of New Brunswick and actually by our good friends and neighbors in the state of Maine who have lent us some of their forest fighters and firefighters, pardon me, and where we have a great relationship to share. So no, the complaints from the States about the smoke from Canada is not top of mind for me right now as we focus on protecting New Brunswickers and getting these fires out.
If I may ask on another pressing issue, I recognize the fires are top of mind right now, but you've been a part of the ongoing effort to try to mitigate Donald Trump's tariffs. You've been a part of sort of all of the premiers have sort of been working with the Prime Minister to try and deal with this. I'm wondering, do you have any new insight or any update on the state of talks right now, where they stand?
Well, you're right that certainly for the last many days, my focus has been on the safety of New Brunswickers. But I think that we're in a curious position right now with Canada having probably one of the better situations globally when we look at the other trade agreements that are being signed. But we have a consistent presence and pressure on the U.S. To get a better deal in place, to get rid of the tariffs that are hurting our economy, particularly those in steel, aluminum, and softwood lumber. And we're trying to get the best deal possible and looking forward to the renegotiation of CUSMA. So I think we're in a funny period right now where we recognize that what we have is not nearly as bad as what some other countries have. And so we don't want to sacrifice that and find ourselves in a worse position while we still strive to get to a better one.
Really quickly, last question. Is there anything your province needs in this moment as you try to navigate tariffs?
Oh, well, look, for us, the softwood lumber tariffs that just went up and are going up again shortly are incredibly damaging to our economy. And actually, they're incredibly damaging to the U.S., who have a real need for the kind of incredible home building lumber that New Brunswick produces. It's some of the best in the world. And they've expressed a housing challenge, and they don't have the wood supply in the U.S. to meet that. And so we want to make sure that softwood lumber deal and those considerations are on the table. And thankfully, we have a Prime Minister that is understanding of the diversity of the Canadian economy, the differences and the unique needs of some of us. We share the issue of softwood lumber with BC, as well as other provinces. So I think we're being well represented by Dominic LeBlanc and by Prime Minister Carney. I think we need all Canadians to continue doing what they've been doing. Buy New Brunswick, buy Canadian, support your local economy, find ways to replace those American products so that we can all be stronger and better off as we continue to sustain this tariff fight and negotiations.
All right, New Brunswick Premier Susan Holt, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Katie.
The Palestinian ambassador to the UN is urging countries to take concrete action to end the war in Gaza.
Find ways to convince one party to come closer to the global consensus that enough is enough. The solution is not wars. We have another option. We have an alternative option.
Riyad Mansour says Canada has an important role to play. He joins me from New York just ahead. Canada and dozens of other countries are calling for urgent action from Israel to stop a famine from unfolding in Gaza. In a joint statement, the countries urged Israel to increase the flow of aid. This is new footage from Han Yunis showing some of the desperation in Gaza. Palestinians struggling to access aid from the few trucks that are allowed into the region. It comes as Israel plans to expand its military operation into Gaza City despite pushback from the international community. Pushback that is, in part, fueling efforts to recognize a Palestinian state ahead of the UN General Assembly in September. Riyad Mansour is the permanent observer of Palestine to the United Nations, and he joins me now. Thank you very much for speaking with us. I want to start by asking you about how Canada, along with Australia, the UK and France, are planning to recognize Palestinian statehood at the UN General Assembly in September. I want to start by asking, what's your reaction to that, and do you see that as a significant move?
We are delighted that this step is going to be taken by Canada, and it is going to be very significant. It's an investment in peace and saving the two-state solution. And hopefully that with this additional number of countries recognizing the state of Palestine, perhaps by September it will be about 160 states recognizing the state of Palestine. That would be a very important development that would open the door wide open for the two-state solution to become a reality, the end of the Israeli occupation, the independence of the state of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital, so that we will be opening the door wide open for peace instead of this mad situation, insane situation imposed on us by the Israeli government, which is contemplating unleashing maybe hundreds of thousands of soldiers against the Gaza Strip to kill more people, to orphan children, to kill children, to deprive them of food and water. This does not make sense. What makes sense is the option of peace, which Canada is playing a very important role, and we welcome that.
We'll talk about the Israeli military plan in a moment, but I want to ask you, part of the reason why Mark Carney said that Canada was willing to go in this direction to change its longstanding position on this is citing the humanitarian crisis on the ground in Gaza. Do you think this diplomatic push from Canada, Australia, France and the UK, can it lead to any change on the ground in Gaza?
The top priority is to stop the war on Gaza. There is a global call, including all the countries that you mentioned, are calling for an immediate ceasefire and to allow for humanitarian assistance to reach all parts of the Gaza Strip to scale and to begin the process of the reconstruction of Gaza and to open the door for peace, for hope, for the two-state solution to become a reality.
Now, Canada made its announcement, but it came with conditions, including that the Palestinian Authority must commit to an election in 2026, Hamas can have no role in that, and that a Palestinian state must be demilitarized. Are those conditions laid out by Canada, are they realistically achievable?
Well, you see that the international community is doing its part by abiding by international law and UN resolutions and the concept of the two-state solution. From our side, we are abiding by our obligation, which was reflected in letters that our president sent to many leaders in Europe, in Canada, and Arab leaders. But what we don't see is commitment from the Israeli side to stop the violence by the settlers, the extremists who are also in the government, such as Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. And I believe that we should put conditions on the Israeli government to accept the two-state solution, to accept to withdraw from the occupied territory, and to accept not to have such extremist elements to be, in charge in the government of Israel, so that to strengthen all forces seeking peace through peaceful methods and seeking, having a conducive environment for, peace in the Middle East and for people to live in tranquility and accepting each other and all countries, and not to resort to violence and killing as we see it in this massive, horrific scale in the Gaza Strip.
Israel and the U.S. have both criticized Canada and these other Western allies for planning to recognize Palestinian statehood, saying that essentially it is a reward for Hamas after leading the October 7th attacks. Do you think that pushback from the U.S., from Israel, could be enough for Canada or others to abandon plans to recognize Palestinian statehood?
I hope not. I believe that Canada was contemplating this issue for a long period of time, from the time of the Madrid conference, in which Canada was in charge of the refugee committee in preparation for the accomplishment of peaceful settlement at that time. Canada was involved. I personally was involved in meeting many times in the foreign ministry with officials, with members of parliament, discussing, all elements that would convince Canada to invest in peace and saving the two-state solution at the beginning of the process, since this is going to be the end game, instead of waiting until, that there is an agreement and then therefore to recognize the state of Palestine. I think that Canada is making the right decision. I think that Canada, after a long time exploration of this issue, came to the correct conclusion that it wants to join almost the great majority of nations in investing in saving the two-state solution by recognizing the state of Palestine, and hopefully by securing membership for the state of Palestine at the United Nations, which is the objective of the partition plan in 1947, which the General Assembly adopted in Resolution 181, that called for the establishment of two states in Palestine after the end of the British mandate. I think that now we are on the verge of completing the other part, which was not completed since 1947, 48, 49. One state came into being and was admitted to the United Nations. The other state is about to be admitted if we can succeed in not having any country to cast a veto on our application in the Security Council, and to recommend the admission of the State of Palestine to the General Assembly. And in the General Assembly, we have a massive, overwhelming majority to welcome and to endorse the recommendation from the Security Council.
But do you think that's a realistic possibility?
I am hopeful. I think it is realistic. Why not? When we have about 160 countries recognizing the State of Palestine, why should it not be a member of the United Nations?
In this moment, for Canadians who are watching this interview, what do you want people to know about what's happening on the ground with civilians in Gaza right now?
The situation is so horrific. And, we invite, as I invited, members of the Security Council the other day, go to Gaza, see the reality as is. Take with you 100 journalists, independent journalists from all corners of the globe. Let them examine and investigate the situation as is on the ground, and come back and report to the Security Council, to the entire international community about the truth of the tragedy of what is really happening to the Palestinian people, to the children, to the women, to the devastation and destructions of our hospitals, of our schools, of our roads, of our infrastructure. Tell the story of the tragedy of the Palestinian people to everyone, and I am sure, such as your audience who are watching us, will be moved and will show the empathy and solidarity with the Palestinian people, and they will even speak louder, saying Let this insanity stop. Let a ceasefire take place. Let humanitarian assistance reach all corners of the Gaza Strip. Let denial of food be stopped as illegally used as a weapon of war. Let humanity prevail instead of this barbarism and this savagery against the Palestinian people, in which we lost more than 200,000 killed, injured, and those who are still under the rubble. We need to see peace. Peace requires a ceasefire. Peace requires accepting the other, and in this case, accepting us as, belonging to the land of the State of Palestine, composed of the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem, to begin a new chapter in our relationship with our neighbors and in the region as a whole in the Middle East. We will open doors for development, for prosperity, for peace, for progress, and the limit is the skies.
Israel's prime minister has denied there's a starvation crisis in Gaza right now. He claims that the images of starving children that so many people have seen are fake. And, he says that Hamas is hijacking aid and that the planned military offensive is a way to free Gaza City from Hamas. What do you say to those claims from Benjamin Netanyahu?
I say two things, If he is so sure of himself, how come he is not convincing a single soul from the international community, including Canada? And secondly, why doesn't he allow 100 independent journalists, including Canadian journalists and members of the international community, members of the Security Council, with the inclusions of everyone and others who might be interested in going to see the reality on the ground in the Gaza Strip and come back and verify who is telling the truth and who is lying?
Mr. Mansour, thank you for your time today.
You're very welcome.
Coming up, what's stopping Canada from reaching a trade deal with the U.S.? The U.S. ambassador in Ottawa now says there are several irritants, but one is huge. The Power Panel on the latest remarks from Pete Hoekstra about Canada and Canadians next. The U.S. ambassador to Canada has a warning for Canadians. Pete Hoekstra says the way this country is responding to U.S. tariffs is threatening the future of our free trade agreement. Here is Hoekstra speaking to podcaster Jasmine Lane.
Some of the retaliatory tariffs to the U.S. are a huge irritant. We have protected the integrity of CUSMA. Okay, our negotiators have said we are not going to implement tariffs on any products that are covered under CUSMA. Canadians have said, well, those guardrails are off. Canada is calling into question the future of CUSMA. It's not the United States of America. It's Canada.
Also today, Ontario announced new financial supports for companies under pressure in the U.S. trade war. The province will provide $1 billion in emergency loan supports for businesses targeted by President Donald Trump's sectoral tariffs. Think steel, aluminum, and the auto sector.
While we can't control the unrelenting determination with which President Trump is pursuing these tariffs, our government can and will continue to stand firm in our unyielding commitment to our workers and our economy. Now, these measures are designed not only to help workers weather the storm, but to position them for long-term success because their paychecks and their livelihoods are depending on it.
It is time for the Power Panel. Ginny Roth is a former Conservative campaign strategist, and here with me is Laura D'Angelo, an advisor to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and Jordan Likeness is a former NDP strategist. Jordan, when we were talking in the break, you said there was something about Pete Hoekstra's comments that really sort of stood out to you. I just wonder if you want to, share with us what that is.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was remarkable listening to the interview. You had the sense that he was recounting an alternative history of what had happened in terms of the notion that Canada had somehow attacked the United States using tariffs, when in fact, of course, we know that the tariff war that was launched by President Trump hit Canada first and hit Canada hardest of all of the U.S. trade partners. I was also really struck by the fact that his tone and his comments about CUSMA are increasingly pointed. And you really have the sense and the idea that there is a threat implied there, that if Canada doesn't come to heel on some of these irritants, as he calls them, like the retaliatory tariffs, that CUSMA itself, which of course is what's providing the bulk of protection to Canadian trade right now, might be in jeopardy.
Ginny, did you also sort of take away that there was a new level of pointed threat on the table there? And should that sort of shape how Canada responds to deal with the ongoing trade war?
I had a similar reaction to Jordan, actually. It was funny to hear him use the phrase counter tariff and then imply that that was some sort of like first volley or, first aggression. It's like, actually in the name, it says counter. We were countering your tariffs. Look, I think some of the counter tariffs have been foolish from the beginning, mainly because they hurt Canadians and they hurt our economy just as much as they hurt the US, if not more, because of the proportionality of them. I also think some of the boycotts we've had in place, the Ontario government took issue with Starlink, and then Elon Musk fell out with Trump. So, I think some of the stuff that was designed to appeal to the domestic audience in Canada that was frustrated with Trump was not worth the squeeze, especially if it is becoming an irritant in the negotiations. Having said that, I don't think Trump or any of his envoys, including the ambassador, is a good faith actor in terms of how they're viewing and talking about these negotiations. They're clearly not trying to come to a fair deal. We know that they see tariffs as like a revenue stream, a way to tip the scales in favor of the US. And so I also don't think we should necessarily take the ambassador's words, or frankly anyone speaking on behalf of the US government administration and their negotiators in good faith. And we're all not in the negotiating room. We don't know where things are falling apart, what Canada's willing to do and not do. And so I don't think we should overcompensate in reacting to the ambassador's comments, especially given that he's mischaracterizing so many important events.
Certainly one thing that sort of stood out there, and in our conversation, in our interview that we did with him last week when he was on here, we pressed him on, this Canada's response did not happen in this vacuum. Like, this was cause and effect. It was the Trump administration came forward with, tariffs related to border security, and Canada responded. And Canada was not the one to make the first move here. What do you make of the way that the ambassador is sort of framing this conversation and trying to sell it to a Canadian audience?
I mean, it really feels like the ambassador's living in an alternate timeline right now. It doesn't feel like he's watching or listening or hearing any of the same things we are. And I think, Ginny called it a mischaracterization, and it absolutely is, right? This is very clear, at least to Canadians, that this trade war was sparked by tariffs, by, threatening CUSMA overall, and by suspending trade talks at various points over the past number of months. And I think a big part of this is also Canadians recognizing and feeling like we need some leverage in these negotiations. These counter tariffs, these measures that the Canadian government are using, whether you agree with all of them specifically or not, are providing Canada with some leverage during the negotiations. And we do need that leverage, right? And I think the Prime Minister and Minister LeBlanc in particular have been clear that if we need to, we will walk some of these pieces back. I think the digital service tax is an example of that. But for now, we also can't just give everything up and end up, frankly, with a deal that isn't particularly great for Canadians, like we've seen in some of the countries that have already done that.
Yeah, Jordan, is that something that stands out to you, that when we take a look at what other countries have been able to negotiate, that perhaps, Canada needs to be in sort of a position where, it needs to focus on what it does have in this moment, and perhaps this is something that Canadians will not like to hear. Perhaps Canadians need to get used to the idea that tariffs are kind of just here.
Well, I think that there's a lot of evidence to suggest that even countries that have negotiated trade deals with Trump, those trade deals aren't worth the paper that they're written on, because he's been willing, for example, in Japan, like he's gone back on agreements that have been made. There's also not a lot of evidence that unilaterally disarming in terms of making concessions on things like counter tariffs or even other things like the digital services tax has done much to advance Canada's negotiating position. So in some sense, I think that probably the best outcome right now for Canada is for not a lot to happen in the moment, and hopefully move towards something a little bit more productive. But the real elephant in the room is the CUSMA renegotiation that's coming, and it's going to come very fast. And so obviously with the proportion of goods that are covered by that, if that were to be weakened and attacked in the same way that we've seen President Trump attack Canada with sectorally specific tariffs, we would be in for some really serious economic trouble.
Yeah, the CUSMA reevaluation is technically set to start in 2026. There'll be a review process that starts in the months leading up to that. Ginny, I want to ask you, do you think there's anything the Carney government could be doing or could be doing better to try and position itself ahead of the review of CUSMA?
I mean, I think they have to be managing expectations a little bit better. I suppose that's in their political interests, but you hear the Prime Minister and others in government say a lot, well, don't fret, everyone. I think if they use the number they use is 85% of goods are covered under CUSMA are not affected by the current tariff regime. Well, if that suddenly is under threat, that really undermines the "don't worry" message. And I think that industry and Canadians need to start preparing themselves. I think Jordan's right. This is looming large, and I don't think it's an accident that the ambassador is sort of raising CUSMA in a semi-threatening way. Because people are taking a lot of comfort in that right now, and I don't think that comfort will necessarily continue to exist. Now, CUSMA benefits go both ways. So much like on a lot of the other tariff conversations, I think we have a strong argument to make to representatives in Congress and senators and governors in the U.S. about individual industries that would be decimated in the U.S. if CUSMA fell apart. So there is some leverage there. But it is a real concern, and we have to start to plan out for our economy what it could mean if that 85% that's currently unaffected all of a sudden is affected.
Laura, given how specific the ambassador's sort of comments were and how pointed they were at CUSMA, we know that Canadian senior ministers have been going down to Mexico. Premier Danielle Smith went down to Mexico. Mark Carney is expected to go down to Mexico. How does that sort of change the dynamic there? Is this an opportunity for Canada to sort of have while we are trading partners with Mexico in this trilateral agreement, things haven't always been smooth between Canada and Mexico specifically. Is this now sort of a must-heal relationship in order to sort of work together to try and deal with Donald Trump?
I mean, I think all indications point that the government certainly feels that way. I think that there is no question we are in a world right now where the relationship, from a trade perspective, between Canada and Mexico has to be very strong. If we are heading into CUSMA renegotiations in early 2026 or before, which certainly seems like it's a potential, then Canada needs to make sure that Mexico is at least in some ways aligned. I think the reality is the ambassador's been clear, with your interview, but also with this interview that we're discussing, that tariffs in some form are here to stay in the long term. And so Canadians need to start wrapping their brains around. That means pretty drastic changes to our economy and to the way we do trade, not just with the U.S., but worldwide.
Jordan, we've got about 2 minutes left. I'm curious, do you think that one thing that Pete Hoekstra keeps bringing up, he's very frustrated with Canada's response, this, buy Canadian, travel Canadian. He seems to be perplexed by why this would happen in this moment. Do you think that Canadians will continue to lean into this, or at some point do, Canadians say, I miss this product, or, I want to go see so-and-so in the United States? Do you see there being a sort of a weakening in this sort of response, taking on a new approach to this?
No, not really. I think Canadians are pretty angry. And in fact, public opinion polls have shown over the course of the summer that they've actually doubled down on calling for strong measures to counter the U.S. tariff attacks. So I think there remains an appetite on the part of Canadians to sort of make maybe what might be symbolic choices, but to make different choices to signal their unhappiness. Now, I would say that we still haven't really felt the full effects of these tariffs, and we may start to feel that more significantly as we go into the fall when we look at unemployment numbers. And so those things, perhaps that will change it then. But for now, Canadians, I think they're still mad and they're still willing to take that fight to the U.S.
And the longer it drags on for steel, for aluminum, for complications for the auto sector.
Absolutely.
Even though we have those carve-outs for the CUSMA compliant goods, it's still an incredibly complicated scenario for Canadian companies to try and navigate. Okay, we'll leave the conversation there for now. Power Panel, thank you so much for joining us today. Ginny, Laura, and Jordan, thanks for watching. This has been Power and Politics. We've got plenty more ahead on CBC News Network. I think we started saying at the end of the show, have a good one. So we'll stick with that. I've only got 2 more days of this. So have a good one. We'll stick with that for now. Stay right here.